Episode 37, Cuba, the polygon everyone ignores. Cuba looks isolated on a political map. On a systems map, it isn't. When you draw borders, Cuba sits at the edge. When you draw flows, Cuba sits at a hinge. This episode isn't about ideology or history. It's about what becomes visible once you draw the polygon correctly. We already ran the data. We already drew the polygon. Once you do that, the conclusions don't require belief. They only require geometry. Act 1, the polygon reality. Start with proximity. Cuba is not distant. It is compressed. Florida is close. The Yucatan is close. Major shipping lanes pass immediately adjacent. On a flat map, these distances look manageable. On a flow map, they collapse. Air traffic, sea traffic, weather systems, and energy routes overlap here. Distance stops behaving the way people expect. Cuba is not surrounded by emptiness. It is surrounded by movement. Currents converge. Storm tracks converge. Maritime traffic converges. That convergence isn't political. It's physical. And physics does not negotiate. Act 2, constraint, not ideology. Once you hold the polygon steady, something else becomes clear. Cuba is a constraint environment. It is an island with limited redundancy. Ports matter more. Timing matters more. Weather matters more. When conditions are stable, these constraints fade into the background. When conditions shift, they become decisive. This is why islands behave differently in systems analysis. Not because of governance. Because of geometry. Storm exposure is uneven. Supply routes are not interchangeable. Delays don't dissipate, they accumulate. In constrained systems, small disturbances propagate faster. Not loudly. Quietly. By the time institutions notice, the system has already adjusted. Act 3, why Cuba is misread. Most institutions don't analyze Cuba this way. They read narratives. They read borders. They read history. Systems don't respond to narratives. They respond to pressure. Pressure moves along paths of least resistance. And those paths only become visible when you stop pretending borders are the system. This is the failure mode. Analysis waits for events. Systems respond to structure. By the time something looks obvious, it has already been obvious to the map for a long time. Nothing here is secret. There is no hidden data. No classified insight. It's all visible. But only if you draw the boundary correctly. Cuba is not peripheral. It is a structural hinge created by proximity, flow, and constraint. You don't need to predict anything to understand that. You only need to look at what already exists. This is what happens when you stop asking what a place means and start asking how a system moves. Nothing here is hidden. It's just invisible until you draw the polygon. Not enough to see. Not enough to alarm the surface. But enough to be measured. Enough to be remembered. Lakes are storytellers. They record what flows into them. They keep the memory of their catchments. And once a baseline exists, that memory becomes public. This is the first line. No interpretation. No accusation. No conclusion. Just a place. At a moment in time. Because every change that follows needs somewhere to begin. And every sequence Starts with a baseline. People speak differently. When permanence is implied. Institutions move differently. When memory is assured. Not because enforcement is certain, but because forgetting is no longer expected. Exposure does not punish. It removes ambiguity. And when ambiguity collapses, responsibility has fewer places to go. This is not surveillance. It is consequence. The system does not act. It observes. What follows is not decided by the record, but it is decided with it.